Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to show you how I pack one of my custom-made guitars before I ship it to a customer. Now, the way I do it is pretty simple. First of all, I always include a hard shell case with all the guitars that I build. It's just a safer way to ship the guitar. However, the case alone isn't enough to ensure that the guitar can ship safely. So what I need to do is I need to pack the guitar so that the guitar will remain stationary in the case and it won't slide back and forth, because that's how you bust a headstock, is when the guitar is suddenly jolted forward and it hits the end of the case. So I'm going to pack it with a styrofoam insert, and that'll keep the guitar stationary, and this nice soft fur faux fur lining will protect the finish from getting scratched as it ships. And then of course it will be placed into a cardboard shipping box. So let me show you how I make that packing insert. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is I have to measure the cavity where the body sits, and that's going to be the dimension for the foam insert that I'm going to use to hold this guitar in place. And in this case, the insert will need to be 13¼ inches wide, and that's from here to here. And then the length of it, the overall length is about 19¾ inches. However, my lower bout is right up against the edges of the inside of the case. So I really only need to have it come to about here. So I'll measure back, and that's going to be about 14½ inches. So I'll need a 13¼ by 14½ inch foam insert. Now the foam that I use for packing material it's an insulation foam that you can pick up from most of your big box hardware stores. And I think I bought this in a 4x8 sheet. So you'll get a lot of packing material out of just one of those sheets, but they are 1½ inches thick, and it's basically just styrofoam, and it's really easy to cut. I just use a hacksaw blade that I've wrapped some duct tape around for a handle, so it's really easy to cut. You can also get hot knives and that sort of thing, whatever you want. And then to mark the dimensions, I just use a Sharpie. But I'm going to start out by marking the rough dimensions of the inside of that guitar case, and that is 13¼ and then a length of 14½. And then I have a T-square, and I can just draw out that shape, and it's square. And then I will cut that shape. And I will do that with the hacksaw blade. And you want to make sure as you're cutting that you're holding the blade vertical. You don't want to be leaning to one side. And as you can see, it's a little bit messy. You do get some of this styrofoam dust, so to speak. And then that is the shape. Now the cool thing is you can peel this stuff off later. I'm going to leave it in place right now so that I can draw the shape of the guitar body that I'm going to cut out. And then what I'll do is I will fit the piece into the cavity, and it should fit pretty tight. You don't want it to move around at all. And then I will set the guitar into position where it will be sitting in that cavity. Then I'll take my Sharpie, and I'm careful to trace the outline so as not to mark on the guitar itself, but I'll mark it a little bit oversized, like that. And I have to make accommodations for the strap button here on the upper horn. And then I'll come around. I can't go all the way. I have to stop because the neck and the fretboard are in the way. But I can fix that in a minute. And then I'll just keep cutting around or tracing around. And that's how I'll get that outline. Now for the area where the neck meets the body, I'm just going to approximate that shape. And I will cut that out. And when I cut this, I'm going to want to cut inside that line because it is larger from tracing than the actual body shape. And I want that foam to conform as closely as possible to the shape of the body so that the body won't wiggle around inside there. Now, of course, cutting this material can be a little awkward because of its shape and the thickness. But as I said, I'm going to be cutting on the inside of this line. And I want to make sure that I keep my saw blade straight up and down. I don't want to angle it. There. Now we have the shape. Now, of course, in order for the guitar body to sit down in here, I have to carve out this area here to accommodate the curved contour of the neck. Now, to create that contour here for the neck to fit in, I'm just going to take a can of spray paint. I'm going to wrap some 80 grit sandpaper around the can, like so, and then I'll just sand it like so, and you can see how I'm starting to develop a natural contour there. Now, of course, presentation is everything, so I don't want my customer to see all this writing and graphics and stuff on the front of it, so you can just peel this stuff off pretty easily. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trial fit the guitar, and I may have to make some adjustments. That fits in pretty nicely. And as you can see, it cannot move in any direction. And that's really important because when you're shipping the guitar, if it's sliding back and forth, it's going to be rubbing the surface against the inner material. But like I said before, you don't want that headstock to be ramming into the end of the case. So this will keep it completely stable while it ships. And then when the customer gets it, they can just pull out this foam and get rid of it if they want to. Another thing I've thought about doing is wrapping this foam in the same kind of fur material that's used on the inside of the case so it actually becomes part of the case. But I would need to make my guitar bodies a little bit narrower in width so that they fit. So who knows? Maybe I'll do that in the future. Okay, so before I can continue unpacking and then close this up, I want to make sure that I detune the strings. I never ship a guitar with the strings tuned to pitch because that's putting a lot of pulling tension on the neck, and I don't want that as the guitar is loaded onto trucks and driven around or put on an airplane and flown across the country or whatever. So I will detune the strings. Now, as far as packing the headstock, and specifically the headstocks the way I design them, I really don't have to do anything because the headstock is floating in this space and nothing is touching it. It's not going to move side to side, up or down, or back and forth. So the chances of it getting damaged are pretty slim. And even if there was a fairly significant impact to the outside of the case somewhere, there's a good chance that that impact is never going to reach the headstock because there's nothing between the headstock and the inside of the case. However, I think customers expect you to do something to protect the headstock during shipment, even though it isn't really all that necessary. So what I'll do is I will simply wrap the headstock with some bubble wrap. And that's really more cosmetic than anything else. It's not going to do anything. And one of the reasons why I think people are somewhat concerned about wrapping and packing a headstock on a guitar is because of the concern for broken headstocks. But if you put too much material around this, and this material is in contact with the sides, the end, and the inside of the top, when it's closed, what will happen is if you have an impact here, that impact is going to transfer through that material to the headstock. But if the headstock is just floating without anything wrapped around it, or just a minimal amount of wrapping material, that impact isn't going to be transferred to the headstock itself, and it's going to probably withstand most impacts. And the only impact that's going to damage this guitar is going to be something so significant that it's going to destroy the guitar no matter how carefully you pack it. So now, as you can see, the styrofoam from cutting it leaves a lot of little particles of styrofoam, but that is incredibly easy to vacuum out. So I have the guitar packed in the case, and now I can close it up and move on to the next step, which is packing the case into a shipping box. Now, when it comes to actually boxing up the case, I'm a big believer in reusing material. So I typically will reuse the box and the packing materials that the case was originally shipped to me in. However, if it's in bad condition, I will go with some new boxes and packing material. And of course, you can get boxes from, I know my local FedEx store sells guitar boxes. You can also get them from Uline, and I believe StewMac sells boxes. You can even go to a local guitar store, like a Guitar Center, and ask them if they have any empty boxes that they wouldn't mind giving up. And those will work pretty well also. But what I'll do is, this is the original packing material, and depending on when the guitar was, the case was shipped to you, will depend on what you get as far as packing material. But I try to make sure that the case itself is going to be protected front, back, and sides and top with this packing material. So I'll lay it in there and make sure that I have a fair amount. We don't have to jam packing material in here. I just want to make sure that I have a good cushion of material. Now the cases that I use, and I use two different kinds of cases. I use a budget hard shell case, and then I use a slightly nicer ABS molded plastic case. And they always come wrapped in this sort of a, I don't know, it's a black material. And that, I think, protects the outside of the case from scuffs caused by your packing material. So I'll go ahead and reuse this. Now to pack the case, I want to make sure that I have plenty of this. This is just brown craft paper, and this is what was the case was originally shipped to me in, so I'm just reusing it. But you can also pick up this stuff at any office supply store. But I want to make sure it goes all the way around the perimeter and on both the front and the back of the case. And I've already placed it in the bottom of the case before I set the case into the box. So I'll just pack it like so, all the way around. And one thing you want to make sure is that you don't pack it too tightly, because that could risk the box splitting open when it's in shipment. To tape the box closed, I'm going to be using 3M's heavy-duty shipping tape. And when I tape, I tend to perhaps over-tape a little bit. I don't care. I want to make sure that the tape is going to hold this thing together as it's being shipped, and I don't want to have to worry about tape tearing. That's never happened to me. I just like to overdo it rather than underdo it. So first thing I'll do is I will tape across the width of the box. And I'll do that in the middle, and then the top side, the top end, and the other end. And I'll actually do this on both sides just to make sure it's going to hold all together nicely. And then I'm going to do the ends as well. Next, I'm going to run a long strip down that center opening seam. And I'll actually do 3 strips of tape, one down the center and then one on each edge of that strip, just to make sure that it's going to hold together nicely. And then I'm going to flip the box over and repeat that same process. Now once I've got both sides taped up, what I like to do is run a strip of tape along this seam here. Just like that. And if there happens to be a seam here and a seam here, I'll do the same with that. There isn't one on this one, so I'm not going to worry about that. All right, so that is how I prepare a guitar for shipment. And the only thing I have left to do is to attach a shipping label. And typically what I'll do is I'll attach it to the side here, and I'll orient it so that the body is at the bottom and the headstock is at the top. And I think that's a safer bet as far as how the guitar is going to be stored as it's being shipped. And I like having the body towards the bottom and the headstock at the top. So that's it. I hope that this video is informative to you. And if so, please, click the thumbs up button. And if you don't subscribe, click the subscribe button. And we will see you in the next episode. So take care.